The year 2030 is just a few years away, and it could be the end times of America in terms of individual liberties. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. What are the Sustainable Development Goals? They came about in 2015, adopted by the United Nations, and while on surface they sound worthy, they sound commendable, they sound nirvana for all, you have to ask yourself, who's in charge and what does it mean for those who aren't in charge? And the answer is loss of liberty. Before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. Yes, you can subscribe to Bold and Blunt there. Just find my name on the site, hyperlinked, click on it, and there will be some easy directions at the bottom of one of my commentaries on how to sign up to my 3 times a week newsletter. Contains all my commentaries that I write for the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcast. You can also get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts, or just go to Google, type in Bold and Blunt podcast, and you'll see you can get it wherever most podcasts are offered. So, what are the Sustainable Development Goals? Let me read from the United Nations' own website about Sustainable Development Goals. SDGs, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to, get this, end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. Wow. Sounds like heaven on earth, right? Except, who's going to be the ones at the top pressing for these goals, ensuring achievement of these goals, making sure all the nations, all the citizens of the nations, all the governments of the nations are equally, fairly participating in the quest for these goals? Lucky for us, we got the global government, right? The global government at the United Nations. Back to the UN website. The 17 SDGs are integrated. They recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Here comes the environmental agenda once again. The environment is so great for leftists, for the power hungry, for globalists, because they can make everything touch on the environment. Don't have enough food to eat? It's climate change. Flooding in your area? Climate change. Viruses killing your populations? Climate change once again. Everything is connected to the environment, according to the left, and that's great for control freaks. Back to UN. Countries have committed to prioritize progress for those who are furthest behind. The SDGs are designed to end poverty, hunger, AIDS, and discrimination against women and girls. The creativity, know-how, technology, and financial resources from all of society is necessary to achieve the SDGs in every context. And there you have it. It's a great grab at wealth. It's a great redistribution of resources. Take from the wealthy, give to the less wealthy. And once again, you got to ask, who's in charge of redistributing the funds in what the UN deems a fair, equitable manner? Here are the bullet points of these 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And remember, we're not talking just communities. We're talking worldwide. We're talking around the globe. Every man, woman, and child. Goal number 1, no poverty. Goal number 2, zero hunger. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. Right there, the top 3 goals: no poverty, no hunger, and great health for everybody. Is this really the role of government to ensure? In America, where it's pull yourself up by your own bootstrap, where it's individual rights, meaning individuals have the right to pursue their own desires and goals in life, absent government intervention, absent their overlords in government? I don't know about you, but I don't think my tax dollars should be taken to make sure citizens across the world have zero poverty, zero hunger, and are 100% healthy. Those top 3 goals will bankrupt America by themselves. But we still have a bunch more. Number 4, quality education. How is that defined? Does that mean free college for everybody? Which in essence makes college moot, useless, worthless. Number 5, gender equality. Look, we have that in America. The left doesn't like to acknowledge that because that takes away their power to divide and therefore conquer based on gender, based on sex. But we do have that. Clean water and sanitation is the next one. Affordable and clean energy, number 7. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Remember, this means you, as an American citizen, are going to be responsible for ensuring that citizens of some developing country, citizens in Burma, citizens in India, citizens in some tribal community in Africa, have access, have ability, and are guaranteed decent work and economic growth. How is that going to happen? Here's how it's going to happen. The government's going to take money out of your paycheck. It's going to take money from your hard work and give to those who don't have. Or more to point, in a socialist communist state, who don't want to work to have. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Wow, America under Joe Biden is already busily pushing this along down the road. Remember when Joe Biden deemed infrastructure everything? It's not just roads, it's not just bridges. It's people, it's work, infrastructure. It's like environmentalism. That word can be stretched to mean whatever the tyrants in office want it to mean. Number 10, reduced inequalities. There's kind of a catch-all phrase for you. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Number 13, climate action. Number 14, life below water. And 15, life on land. You get what that means, don't you? That it's our responsibility as American citizens to make sure that all the sea creatures of the world, all the mammals of the world are provided for, that they're not going extinct, that they're happy and healthy, no doubt that they have access to good jobs and infrastructure. Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. That's like saying, let's just obliterate corruption in governments around the world. No need for the military. Everybody's happy. There's nothing to fight over. Everybody's equal. Everybody has good health. Everybody has good jobs. Everybody's well educated. Nothing but peace and justice around the globe. And number 17, partnerships for the goals. That right there is the summary sentence of how these goals will be maintained, and it's code for a few select global elites at the top. Think of the Davos crowd in charge of ensuring that the rest of the citizens of the world partake and participate in these other 16 goals. Look, I'm all for governments working toward the betterment of humanity, working to improve the lives of the citizens that they serve. But that's the key word right there, serve. I'm not all for a few elites at the top thinking they know better than the rest of the world's citizens how we the citizens should live our lives. And they take from Peter to pay Paul, and not really to enrich Paul, but rather to boost and elevate their own ability to control both Peter and Paul. In America, we have access to these goals. The Constitution lays the groundwork for us as individuals to pursue life, liberty, happiness. And we're supposed to have a limited government that stands back and lets us go for, say, businesses that will provide for ourselves and our own families economic opportunities. We're supposed to have a government that stays out of, say, healthcare to allow the free market to provide the best innovations and technology and developments to give us access to medical treatments, health treatments that help us better our own health. We're supposed to have a government that stands back and allows us in this free market to pursue creative endeavors and economic opportunities that keep poverty at bay. We already have a fine education system in this country, made worse in recent times by the unions and the socialist communist union leaders who are pushing propaganda and anti-American messaging into our public school systems. But by and large, we have good education or opportunity to tap into good education in this country. So really these goals are for third world countries or countries run by corrupt leaders or tribal areas of the world where women's rights aren't even a thing. They're below that of dogs' rights. We don't have that in America. So for us to participate in these goals doesn't make sense. All it does is set America up as the pool of resources from which to strip, from which to tap, to redistribute to the rest of the world. And yet this is where the global governments, not just the UN, but the World Economic Forum, this is where the global elites are busily trying to funnel the world and America. And the danger here is that under Joe Biden, under this puppet president, under this feckless White House administration, it's taking place. The 2030 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are going forward with all speed. It's alarming. And you know, this was taking place before Joe Biden, except there was a guy named Donald Trump who loved America and came forward and ran for the president of the United States with an America First agenda, and he won. And so he pushed these globalist forces back in their little boxes. He forced them to stand down. Well, here we are once again, rounding the corner on Joe Biden's second year in office, headed into the third, and the global forces everywhere are cheering and applauding because America once again is weakened and ripe for the picking. So when we look forward to 2024, who is the best candidate for the White House? Once again, it's Donald Trump. Without a doubt, it's Donald Trump. Not only has he proven himself as someone capable of fighting, not just the media, not just the Democrats, but the global crowd. But he has proven himself as capable of fighting through all kinds of intense attacks. He is still an America First candidate. And at this time, after 4 years of Joe Biden, believe me, we are going to need an America First candidate like never before in history. And I have with me a guest who worked within the Donald Trump administration who can maybe shed some light on what makes Donald Trump tick, why he is so necessary to America's future freedoms, and what's going through his mind right now as he has announced an intent to run for the White House and as he is actively seeking the support of not just the Republican Party, of course, but conservatives around America. Her name is Kelly Sadler. She is a commentary editor with me at the Washington Times, and I'm very happy she could take time out of her busy schedule to be here on Bold and Blunt. Kelly Sadler, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
So I wanted to have you on here because you worked within the Trump administration. And so I'm just curious how much insight you can provide on what Donald Trump is thinking right now about his White House run. Can you start by talking about the scope of your work in the administration?
Yeah, so I worked in the Trump White House. I was the director of surrogates there, so I'm the one who kind of churned out talking points to everyone on the outside about what policies we were enacting. Everything from foreign policy, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, to getting out of the Paris Climate Accord, to getting out of the JCPOA, to some more domestic things like passing the Tax Cuts Act that we did. I think that was in 2017. So that's what I would do. I'd translate these policies and what we wanted to get out there to both the press as well as to surrogates on the outside groups.
So it's safe to say that you have some insights into the inner workings of campaign Trump and also into the mindset of what Donald Trump thinks of.
Yes.
Okay, so what is driving his run in 2024?
What is driving his run? Well, I think it's the fact that he lost in 2020 and can't believe that he lost in 2020. And that was a tough year, and that was a tough race just because of the coronavirus pandemic. It was unusual, and there was no issues and there was no specific agenda that he was running on, and Biden could just run from his basement, basically say nothing other than he's going to restore normalcy. And I think a lot of people were attracted to that message because everything was so disruptive in 2020. We had the riots, we had the Antifa, BLM riots in the streets. People were at home being told to mask. Kids weren't in school. So I think the message, I'll return this country to normalcy, worked on the public, and the president wants some vindication because now he's watching Joe Biden's agenda. And it's anything but normal, right? You've got a Russian war in Ukraine. You've got China that's looking to go into Taiwan. You've got Joe Biden begging Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to pump more oil because they don't want us to be energy independent, all in their climate green change, climate ideals. So I think you see the president sitting out on the sidelines, just being like, things were really good under with my policies for the last 4 years. We had record low before the pandemic. We had record low unemployment. Gas was sitting around, $1.50, $2 a gallon. We had more people engaged into the workforce than ever before. People were feeling good about the direction of the country when President Trump was in office. And so I think that he's now looking to kind of restore some of his policies that worked so well for the American public.
Do you think his inability to let go of the rhetoric about how he actually won in 2020 is actually hurting him, as the far left and anti-Trumpers say, or do you think it is actually benefiting him?
I don't think it's benefiting him at all. People, when they cast their ballot, they want to look toward the future. They don't want to look to the past. And I think you and I can agree that there was a bunch of irregularities in 2020, and the fact that a lot of these voter laws were changed and expanded because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then you had Mark Zuckerberg, fund millions of dollars of dark money into supporting, get out the vote efforts in mail drop boxes in a lot of these swing counties and swing states. So there was, and then you had big tech suppression of the Hunter Biden story, calling it, Russian misinformation, and anyone who wanted to talk about the lab leak in Wuhan being the reason for COVID-19 was labeled as misinformation and put out on these platforms. So we were working against a lot in 2020, but the American people don't care, right? They just wanted a return to normalcy. They wanted to see what President Biden could do to better their lives. They didn't like the noise from Donald Trump, the constant, him on Twitter, the January 6th stuff that happened. Like, it all got to be too much for people. So I think if Trump is going to be successful in 2024, he's got to stick to the issues, the things that won him the campaign in 2016, and that's a focus on trade, taking it to China, bringing back U.S. jobs and manufacturing, cutting back on illegal immigration, building the border wall. These are the issues that propelled him to the front stage and gave him the presidency, and he needs to return to those issues.
So who does he listen to, and how do you best persuade him to listen to reason?
Well, I mean, in his gut, he's got the policies right. I mean, he is the one who crafted the America First agenda, and you'll see Republicans across the country are adopting his agenda. Ron DeSantis won big time in Florida, but he won basically on Donald Trump's platform. So Trump has got to he's got to rein himself in, and it's like, I don't know if he can do it. I thought he had a really great opening, when he announced his 2024 campaign. The speech was on point. It laid out a bunch of the national greatness agenda, a lot of the, campaign items that he wants to run on. But then he goes and invites Kanye West to Mar-a-Lago. And that's still in the headlines today about meeting with anti-Semites like Nick Fuentes. And those types of mistakes cannot happen. Donald Trump is now announced for his presidency, and if he wants to run and be a serious contender, there needs to be more vetting that goes down in Mar-a-Lago, and he can't be making these stupid mistakes.
I wanted to bring that up about his recent hosting of Kanye with Nick Fuentes at his home in Florida. And it was interesting because I was just reading this NBC account of the inside story of this dinner. And you can take from it whether that's truthful or not. But apparently there is talk now or it's being reported now, that Kanye with Nick Fuentes actually set up this dinner in hopes of entrapping Trump to basically bring forward negative headlines. And so on that count, it would be successful for them. But it seems very human of Donald Trump to allow Kanye into his home, because he loyalty is number one to this president, it seems.
Yeah, and when he was in office, Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, his then wife, really helped with criminal justice reform. And the President Trump was able to step across bipartisan lines to work on that issue with them. So there is a past, there is a history with Kanye. However, Kanye just seems to be really troubled at this point. And I think that the president sincerely wanted to help him with his business dealings. He's just been dropped from Adidas, a bunch of, his sponsors. He's losing money. It's like how to rehabilitate him. But it really did look like Kanye set this up to entrap President Trump. And if you're going to meet with Kanye, but meet with him not in your club where there's, a bunch of different onlookers. Do it in your private residence and have it just be with him. Don't allow him to bring guests, especially if those guests are unvetted.
So going forward, look at 2024, and of course everybody's talking about the big showdown, Trump versus DeSantis and so forth. I personally think that Trump's got it in the bag if he were to face DeSantis for the primary. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we see that DeSantis is gearing up for a potential run. He's got a new book, an autobiography that's going to be coming out, and he's going to be going out on the national stage to up his profile. There's one big key difference, there's two actually, between Trump and DeSantis. The first one is Ron DeSantis has no foreign policy experience. He's never been the chief executive of the United States of America. We don't know what his policy positions are on Ukraine, on China, on Venezuela, like he's been untested in that, with Israel, whereas President Trump has a proven track record with foreign policy. And the second one is that Ron DeSantis has never been tested on the national stage and by the national news media. And you think Trump was vilified. At least he stood up and he still fights. Ron DeSantis has not proven that he can come out a fighter and a winner when the news media flips on him. He's going to be worse than Trump. He's going to be worse than Hitler. And how does he actually handle that pressure?
So when you were in the White House working in the Donald Trump administration, can you recall a time where there was ever a policy or action that President Trump wanted to take and he was persuaded into doing something differently? Can you kind of showcase how that might have gone?
I don't have an example for you. I have examples for you of how he wanted to do a policy, and people within his own administration were trying to tell him that wasn't right and that he couldn't do it. Moving the capital of Israel to Jerusalem was one such thing. He promised to do it on the campaign trail. He said he was going to do it, and then people within his own administration were like, "Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if we can do this. Like doesn't seem." And so that went through many back and forth before the president just ultimately did it and made the call. The same thing can be said about getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement. There was competing minds within the administration that maybe we shouldn't get out, that wouldn't be a good PR move for us, and that we need to be, as Republicans, more sensitive to the climate issue. Ultimately, we got out. And so he heard from both sides throughout his time in office, but he ultimately made the call, and the call was what he promised to do on the campaign trail. So he stood up to those influences, but this is one thing that I will say, if he is running again in 2024, personnel is policy, and the better choices need to be made. He needs to be surrounded with people who support his America First agenda, not try to undermine it.
One would assume that he's better armed going into 2024 with the knowledge it takes to do just what you described, to have people surrounding him that are 100% in support of his own America First type of agenda.
Yes. I mean, that's hopefully one of the lessons that he learned from his first 4 years.
So just to wrap up with a couple more questions, his views on China, do you think they've changed any watching how China has completely steamrolled this feckless Joe Biden administration? Do you think he would come back even stronger against China?
Oh, absolutely. And, what is so ironic, it's not ironic, it's sad, is that right before the Wuhan virus swept over the world, President Trump had just signed a trade deal, a historic trade deal with China. That leveled the playing field for American manufacturers. And unfortunately, it was not implemented because then the pandemic hit. And the president the very first thing he did was shut down travel to and from China, and that was against Dr. Anthony Fauci's wishes. But it was a smart thing to do. It was the right thing to do. One of the things the Biden administration still has done, which I can give them credit for, is it's kept the majority of Trump's tariffs on China. But President Trump, has said that he's going to demand reparations from China for the economic damage that was inflicted on the world, but especially on U.S. consumers and the U.S. economy. And, he also will take it to them on trade issues, and he will get to the bottom of where this pandemic originated from, something that Joe Biden doesn't ever seem to want to bring up when he's talking with President Xi.
Last question. I'm watching with alarm as the global agenda is just being pushed with rapid speed through this White House. And I'm wondering, 2 more years of Joe Biden, are we going to be at the point in America where we can't go back to individual rights? Do you think a president like Donald Trump can reel back the damage from this administration? Or do you think this administration is just pushing too hard on the global agenda that even Donald Trump couldn't reel it back?
Well, I don't think anything is impossible to come from, but there is going to be tremendous damage done, and the number one damage that's being done is being done to our energy sector. and that it's a national security problem. It is something that's so easily ended. You got to end the war on American energy, and that is the number one priority item in Donald Trump's, national greatness agenda that he's proposing to run on in 2024. It was done before. We were producing more. We were drilling more. Pipelines were being built. The red tape was being cut. And as soon as Joe Biden's out of office, many of these, oil and gas companies, if President Trump is reelected, will start making these investments again. They don't want to make these investments for the short term. And they especially don't want to make it under a president who wants to, ban drilling altogether. So that would be a welcome change, and I think that is the first thing that Republicans, quite frankly, in the House need to take on starting in January, starting to get rid of some of this red tape when it comes to pipeline building and construction, and exploit Joe Biden's green agenda, because that's really what is driving his entire administration on the foreign policy level, on a domestic level, and it's going to ruin our country.
Yes, Republicans in this new Congress need to step up and be prepared to fight. Kelly Sadler, thank you so much for your insights. I really appreciate you taking the time for Bold and Blunt.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it.
Donald Trump, 2024, that's my pick, and here's why. He's proven, he's dogged in his determination to put America first, and he has 4 years of experience of dealing with and publicly, successfully fighting the deep state and global forces that are actively, busily, and despicably seeking to steal American exceptionalism. Ron DeSantis is great, but Ron DeSantis in 2028, not 2024. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.